class of 2017. So they are ready to talk to you about some things you can do in your garden in the fall. So I'd like to turn it over, Verna and Karen.
Welcome, everybody. And we are very happy that you have chosen to spend some of your Wednesday afternoon with us. And a lot of times this is called putting your garden to rest, but I like to think of it as the peaceful autumn garden. And I am Verna, and I've been a master gardener for 2 years, and I have loved every minute of it, just really enjoying gardening and learning so much from research-based information and with the wonderful Master Gardeners of Kent County.
Hi everybody, my name is Karen Abadi. I am also a Kent County Master Gardener, and as Debbie has said, Debbie, Verna, and I were all in the same graduating class. As Verna has said, the time, even though on a day like today, it doesn't feel necessarily like autumn, it's a little warm in the sun there, but there's a lot of important things to take care of in your garden as we're preparing for the fall season. One little disclaimer, please keep in mind that Verna and I are not professionally trained horticulturists. We are actually volunteers with the local cooperative extension here in Delaware. We've gone through extensive training, but we don't know it all. I learn something every day, to tell you the truth. So if we can get started. Oops, hold on a second. There we go.
And I thought we need to explain first what our philosophy of a peaceful garden. This is such a beautiful time of year, and gardening, you know, we don't want to think of it as a task that we just have to do, and we want it to be a peaceful, wonderful experience for everyone. And there are so many gardening techniques that are totally research-based and really, really just mimic the wonderful natural processes that we see of growing plants in the woods naturally. And I live in the woods personally, and so I really have gotten to learn how to have harmonious relationships with most of the wild animals in my area. There is a kind of a silly kind of respect for squirrels, especially because I've learned to live with even my squirrels, but we have deer, everything here. So we want to be able to learn to live with our wonderful insects and squirrels and pollinators, and also use really natural practices as much as we can to really encourage pollinators to stay. And just using processes such as companion planting and rotation of crops rather than having to use harmful chemicals to garden. And here is our agenda. And, you know, we're going to start out by talking about the vegetables that we plant at this time of year, the cool season vegetables, and what to do with perennials and bulbs for spring flowers. Now is the time to be planting perennials before the first frost occurs. And then also the process of cleaning up vegetation, but actually in a more positive note, it's kind of the harvest season, just being able to gather all those vegetables that you have been growing through the spring and summer and bringing them inside before the first frost. And this year, of course, is a little more challenging because we're having colder weather, a little faster than we normally do. And then, you know, pruning the plants and taking care of shrubs and trees. And now is the time to do some lawn care also. And we will have suggestions on what to do and what to leave. And then bringing in some of your plants that you know in this climate would not be successful, and how to bring in those house plants and how to take care of them, what to bring in, what to leave out. And then just learning from the things that you did this year, or if you're a new gardener, just to do some research and to plan that garden for next year. This is the time to really think about your successes and your challenges and really plan for a peaceful garden community for the next year. And if you think of other things you would like to talk about, just put them in the chat box and we will make sure that we address those also if we are able to.
Absolutely. Thank you, Verna. We wanted to be intentional to call your attention to the fact that gardens don't have to be what we traditionally might think of, you know, Farmer McGregor has a big garden. It doesn't have to be a traditional garden. It can be a garden in any form that you pick. So this information that we're providing today is inclusive of many types of settings. You see here a raised bed garden with some vegetables, but many of the things that we talk about today are going to be applicable to container gardening as well. And oftentimes people will put containers in their traditional beds just for an extra layer of depth or height, what have you. And of course, here are mums as we go into the fall season. This is very reminiscent of that. But keep in mind as well, when you're thinking of gardening, it doesn't have to be gardening in silos. And I don't mean this in any other way than you can plant your herbs with your flowers. You can plant your veggies in between different things. So sometimes we might have to think a little bit outside the box. It's still gardening. We want to diversify, and that helps all of the plants in the garden, whatever that garden might look like for you.
And this is the time when you are planting the cool season vegetables or plants now. The lettuces, cabbages, Brussels sprouts, kale, broccoli, and cauliflower. I know that I always plant my cool season. I have in the past planted them too soon, and I have lettuce that is supposed to be head lettuce, and it just bolts. It just has this long stem because I planted it too soon, and the heat got to it. Lettuce doesn't do really well in the sun and in the really warm temperatures. So I've been reading more and more about planting lettuce outside, like 2 weeks before the frost, or some of these vegetables 2 weeks before the frost, rather than in the really warm temperatures. But it's so wonderful to be able to plant at this time. A lot of times you're so concentrating on harvesting, but this is the time to have vegetables that last later on too. And they always suggest after you plant them to put some nice mulch around them also, just to retain the temperatures in the soil. And ground up leaves are really a great mulch if you can use that, in the dry leaves, just mulching them up and putting them around your cool season vegetables seems to be one of the best suggestions that you can. But don't plant them and of course now our soil is getting a little cooler now because of the temperatures in the 40s that we've been getting at night.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And Verna, this carries on with your same theme about lettuce. And there are other things that we can plant this time of the year.
Yes, and now is the time to be planting onions and also, and they say onions you plant 4 weeks before a frost, and garlic. Fall is the best time to plant garlic. And of course, garlic will not be growing, will not be harvesting until the spring. So that is something I'm going to try for the first time. When I was an amateur gardener, well, actually, a couple of years ago, before I really had a lot of the coursework, I planted garlic in the spring and did not have good luck, not realizing that the fall is the best time to plant garlic.
It took me 3 years to grow a successful garlic bunch. And I made the big mistake of the first year I did maybe a little bit, and then the next year I was like a little bit more. And then the third year I planted lots of different varieties in the fall. And I figured even if half of it didn't make it, I still would have a good harvest. All of it made it. Oh my gosh. I still have garlic from last year. But I think it tastes significantly better.
It's a huge difference.
Yes, it is a huge difference. Absolutely. Absolutely. When we look at the fall, don't forget to add perennials. It's going to yet again enhance that winter landscape. It's going to provide food for birds. It's important to keep in mind wildlife now as well. Um, Many birds rely on the seeds of dried perennials for food. For example, goldfinches, they can be seen on purple cornflowers, that echinacea, enjoying those seed treats. So don't be in a big hurry to cut them all down. And I speak from experience. These are mistakes that I have made, so I learned the hard way. In addition, don't forget that shrubs and ground covers also provide a space for native insects, as well as other animals that are overwintering, including birds. Um, Perennials are also beneficial to the insects because it allows for a place to hide. It provides them some safe protection from the environment this time of the year, including from predators. So we need to keep many things in mind as we're not only cleaning the garden, but preparing for the weather. Now is a good time. Now to mid-October, early October is a good time to plant winter bulbs. And by that, I mean spring bulbs, daffodils, crocuses, tulips. You want to get them in before the ground freezes. Also seeds for hollyhocks, as well as silver dollar plants you would want to plant now. In addition, keep in mind you might want to use some season extenders. And by season extenders, we're talking about things like cold frames or straw or row covers to protect your plants from a hard freeze. And of course, we often recommend, if at all possible, to look into utilizing native plants because yet again, that is very helpful for our native wildlife population regionally.
And also, this is a great time to plant perennials and native plants. I had a wonderful suggestion from one of the trainings that I have attended, and they said to really look at your garden and the different colors that you have in your garden. It's really beneficial to have flowers of different colors and, you know, and leaves and textures. And the fall is a good time to get those perennials in the ground because over the winter, the roots will grow and they'll be ready for the spring. But we have to remember that, especially with native plants, it takes like 3 years for them to really look, you know, like they're really surviving well. I always wondered, I would plant my perennials in the fall thinking that that was a good idea. And then in the spring, I would look at them and go, oh, I must have done something wrong because it doesn't look really good. But it takes a few years for them really to root and to be at their optimum. So don't worry.
Absolutely.
Just colors that you need in your garden so that way you can really create a really diversified garden, especially with a native plant.
Absolutely. And sometimes, if you're a good shopper, sometimes you can find perennials on sale at this time of year because some, whether it be a local nursery that closes for the season or wants to get rid of their stock for the season, sometimes in the big box stores, they don't keep these things over winter. So I found some good sales. So you can be on the lookout.
And now, of course, is the time for harvesting. So you're getting up your vegetables and picking them. And especially, I know I have a lot of tomatoes, so I've been picking them all through the season. And I'm finding the quality of tomatoes aren't as good now that we've had the cold weather. So it's really a good time to bring them in. You want to get them in before the first frost. And usually the first frost is in October. But this year, I'm not really confident about that. So we really have to, you know, get them but just watch that weather for that first frost. And bring your tomatoes in and place them in a cool spot, but not the refrigerator. Tomatoes really lose their flavor in the refrigerator. So make sure you store them. And when I know there's going to be a frost, I will gather all of them. I'll just pick all of the tomatoes, even if they're green, and just let them turn red. And of course, they don't taste as good as they do when you're picking them daily, but still you want to save them and not just have them freeze. So bringing in all those vegetables, and it's fun to have different recipes that you can find using the different vegetables when you have an excess right before the frost. And then you want to place, if your vegetable plants are disease-free, and then you can place them in your compost and, just let them kind of do their thing and heat up, and then you can use the compost when it's ready. But if you do have plants that are diseased, you want to dispose of them instead, either throwing them in your trash or in a pile someplace. You want to remove all of your annuals, and you want to remove the leaves of your plants that have turned brown. But like Karen said, you want to leave some of those seed pods and flowers and let them just sit, if you have perennials, so that the birds and the wild animals can eat them over the winter. You can divide your perennials. Sometimes you get plants that just really have multiplied, and you can divide them every 2 or 3 years, and you can do that either now in the fall, or you can wait until the spring to do that also. I know my hostas are needing to be divided this year. And then again, like that mulch, put the mulch on now just to kind of protect your perennials from the cold. There are some bulbs that are gladiolas and dahlias and some other tender bulbs you would want to bring in. It has been suggested in some places. I've had dahlias stay outside, but there are some resources which I have read which have said to bring them in and put them in peat moss and store them in a cool place over the winter until spring, when you can plant them back again.
Absolutely.
And also your daffodils, you want to, you can leave your daffodils out, but you can kind of, if you have too many all in one spot, you can kind of find a new location for some of your bulbs outside.
There you go. We also recommend that a soil test be done at least every 3 years. Oftentimes people will think to do this with spring planting, but it is not a bad idea to get that soil test now. At the time of this filming, because of the pandemic, our local cooperative extension office is closed. However, and I know we have people from all over the United States and even some people overseas, you can reach out to your local cooperative extensions and determine what their policies are now as to getting that done. From a broad perspective, it is recommended that you take a representative sample from many sites where you are interested in getting the testing done. So by this I mean, if you're interested in getting the testing done, perhaps in your where you plant your vegetable gardens, you would take several samples from there. If you're interested in your lawn, then you would take several samples from that area. So you would want to collect that representative sample of the specific place. You wouldn't want to do lawn and vegetable garden in the same mix. Once you obtain that sample from the area that you would like tested, it is asked that you put approximately 1 to 1.5 cups in a sampled zippy bag and mix it around, label it with your name, as well as where the site is that you have tested. This is my lawn, this is my flower bed, what have you. And again, each cooperative extension will probably have a specific form that needs to be completed. And obviously you would need to reach out to them as to how the samples get dropped off now because of the pandemic, and speak to them about testing. Here in Delaware, you can look at the cooperative extensions, whether it be Kent, Sussex, or Newcastle, on their website. they have the directions for you. So, Verna, are you doing trees or am I doing trees? I don't remember. I got so involved with my soil testing.
I think that was you.
Oh, this is me too. This is me too. Sorry, I apologize. So trees, you want to remove dead branches. As you all know, there's been a lot of crazy weather this year. It's just been a crazy year. So you want to remove those dead branches. You want to make sure that they're not going to become a hazard, whether it be with winter storms or high winds or what have you in whatever area you are living in. Transplant small trees after the leaves have fallen. Keep in mind that the hole that you're planting that tree in, I always thought it had to be super deep. It really actually has to be wider than it is deep. With regard to shrubs, similar concept, remove any dead branches. It's recommended, contrary to popular opinion yet again, that you do not trim spring flowering shrubs. You trim them after they have completed flowering. So it is not the time to do that now. With regard to vines, not just grapevines, but a lot of vining flowers. Oftentimes it is advantageous, and again, we speak in generalities here, to trim. I trimmed my vine. It took me 3 years and it became a monster. And I gave it a hard trim this year. There's literally 2 feet of it left in the ground. And it's helpful for the plant. When we speak to lawns, keep in mind that you will want to apply fertilizer in the fall. And do not apply fertilizer within 15 feet of waterways. You also want to be mindful, oftentimes the spreaders that are used for fertilizer will spread in places other than the lawn. So you would want to sweep that up off of sidewalks, driveways, paths, what have you, and make sure that it only remains on the grassy area. We don't want to affect the environment or the animals in it with our fertilizer. It's also best to reseed cool season grasses now in the fall. The seeds often need that warm soil to germinate, so we want to do it now before the soil gets too cool. Soils are traditionally in our area of Delaware warm still in August and September, certainly warm enough to apply those grass seeds. And once that grass has germinated, once those seeds have been placed down and germinated, then they need the cool temperatures to grow. So again, oftentimes people will think you need to reseed in the summer or the spring. Actually, it's very much more useful to do it now. In Delaware here, we have a wonderful website. It's called Delaware Livable Lawns. If you just type that into your search engine, DelawareLivableLawns.org, it speaks to a lot of great healthy lawn care recommendations, as well as keeping the environment and our waterways thriving while we're gardening. Oh, and here we speak to raking up those leaves yet again. Verna had spoken to this earlier. You can use your leaf mulch in your gardens, in your bedding areas. But again, keep in mind, if you have treated that tree or those leaves with something that, you know, some kind of insecticide, fungicide, something along those lines, then you would not want to use it for mulch. And again, you can also add that leaf mulch to your compost pile. And here, yet again, we just reiterate, again, investigating that soil testing. In Delaware, it's a very nominal fee for the amount of information you get back and the recommendations with regard to, say, fertilizing your lawn. I was shocked when I did mine, quite honestly. So houseplants, Verna.
Okay. Well, I always try to bring in some of my plants. I've had geraniums for like 15 years that I've been bringing in and then bringing out again in the spring. And what I've learned this year is a lot of people have windows that are tinted. And I didn't realize, and sometimes you can't even see the tinting on them. And the problem is you're not going to get the full sunlight that you need for some of the plants that really thrive on sunny conditions. So check out your windows, first of all. And with plants that really are not going to make it, I mean, I have some tropical plants that I have had for many years, and my lemon tree, my lime tree that I bring out in the spring. So I always have to bring it back in. We had an old sailing canoe that we put this plastic top on, and that became my plant, where all my plants go in my sunroom in the winter. But I have a south-facing window, and that is really the best, for plants that need a lot of sun. But before you bring them in, check for insects and diseases. And I always try to do like the least thing I can do. I start with the least harmful thing, to the environment. So I look all my plants over, and I hose down the leaves with, just the hose, the spray with the hose. And in a couple of days, and this is a couple of days before I'm going to bring them in. And if I see insects or something, then I might have to use like insecticidal soap. And then my third measure, if I have to, I have a timeout room for some of the, so I don't want all of my plants to be infested when I bring them in. So if I have a couple that I'm just they need a little TLC, and I don't want them near my other plants that I'm bringing in, I will put them in my timeout bedroom and watch them until I feel that they can socially be with other plants. But it is important. There are some plants that I just won't even bother bringing in because they just don't look like they're going to thrive inside. It's a lot harder on plants to be moving them back and forth. So there are some plants I just have to say, you're not coming in. I will say goodbye to you for this year, the annuals. But I do try to bring in, plants that I have brought out all year. And also a tip on Christmas cactus that I found out is, make sure that you bring it in a cool room. And if you want it to, I always have like Easter cactus, instead. And so what it says is, in order for it to flower at Christmas time, you don't water it for 4 weeks, and that will stimulate bud growth. So just try that if you are having trouble, if you have an Easter cactus or a Thanksgiving cactus. Maybe you will have a Christmas cactus this year. It's all about watering, I guess. I try to bring some of my herbs inside. Some just don't do well, but I try. I'm always trying new things to bring in and see if I can get them to keep, because I love fresh herbs. There's nothing like the taste of fresh herbs. And even, if you are successful in bringing them in for the winter, it's really lovely to, reach on your kitchen windowsill and cut off a few pieces of basil or parsley and have it right there for you to use. But just make sure it is a sunny window and that you do give them water. They do need a lot of water over there. And let me see if there's anything else, but just, check on, plants, on which plants need a lot of sunlight and which plants do well in the shade. And of course, if you're bringing them in from outside, you just have to replicate the growing conditions in your house as you had in the outside area there. And you also could choose to, like you can see in that bottom picture there, a lot of people are successful in drying their herbs instead of growing them inside. And we have to put a plug in for Debbie Nicole is going to be doing a workshop on herbs. We'll talk about the date later on when we'll advertise when that date is. So I would strongly recommend, Debbie is a wonderful presenter, so I would strongly recommend signing up for the herb workshop.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, there are many things that really can be invested in time-wise, now in the autumn of this year to prepare for next spring. And I don't know about you, but with the pandemic and everything that's been going on, this year, I am out in the garden, I feel more than I ever have been. Um, I like that scarecrow. I like that scarecrow. Again, obviously we feel quite strongly about it. Have your soil testing done. What that's going to determine for you are the nutrients that are lacking potentially or in excess in the area that you have tested. And with that testing result, you receive recommendations as to what should or should not be done to that soil. Um, you want to, again, cover weeds and grassy area with clean cardboard. Um, it's a wonderful way to reduce, reuse, and repurpose any of those boxes that you get from shipments. Yet again, I'm getting a lot this year. I would imagine that many people are. Remove any plastic tape. You don't want to use a box that has a lot of ink on it, but if it's a traditional old-fashioned cardboard box, just split it open and you can lay it flat to cover weeds. You can also use it as a layer underneath your mulch. Um, Again, you want to look into actually preventing future weed growth. And that's what we mean when we're talking about preparing the soil for a new garden. You might be interested in sowing a cover crop. You see several of those listed here. Depending upon your space and your time and your interest, that might be something that is of interest to you. Again, as you see here, it adds nutrients to the soil. Last but not least, we have here cover any flower gardens, yet again with leaf mulch. Don't be in such a hurry to rake up your leaves. They really are more important than you might have realized. But again, you want those to come from untreated sources, as it were.
And now is the time, and I would suggest having a garden journal throughout the year where you can really write down, you know, where you purchased your plants, or maybe you had plants that you grew from seeds. Make sure you save the little envelopes of seed envelopes, or just know which catalog you got them from, what variety they were, if you were successful with them, or write down the problems that you had in your garden. It's really important for you to really reflect in the fall on what were your successes and what were your challenges. What do you want to do differently? A couple of years ago, I had a terrible time with insects eating my tomato plants. I also had a lot of trouble with well, of course, the weather. When I planted I always grow my tomato plants from seeds. And when I planted them in my garden, I really didn't watch the weather. And I planted them right before we had torrential rains. And there were periods of rain followed by just very dry conditions, and then more rain. And I just had all kinds of diseases and bugs and everything on my tomato plants. So I thought, if this is what gardening in Delaware is like, I love heirloom tomatoes, and I did plant more of them the following year, but I also decided on trying some hybrid tomatoes based on the different bugs that I had, and worms, and I had all kinds of things. And it worked out really well that I found some hybrid that seemed to be addressing some of the issues that I was having. So reflecting on the problems that I had helped me the next year with my garden. And just kind of investigating new ways of gardening. And I was really having problems with my zucchini. I probably the only person in the universe that I had wonderful flowers on my zucchini plants, but they never really matured into any zucchini. So I decided maybe I need some pollinators. I need some flowers in my garden. So I started planting my zucchini plants with marigolds and other, coneflowers and all kinds of things to attract bees and pollinators and other, pollinators. And this year I had 5 zucchini plants and I had like 40 zucchini. So I think I kind of solved that problem. I think next year I'm going to maybe have 4 zucchini plants because, and I also found I was having trouble that my zucchini was like wrapping around my entire garden. And so I found a kind of a bush variety of zucchini. So that seemed to be helpful too. And just native plants, I'm just, and companion plants are so important. The idea, my father was really he was very, very organized, and he had these rows of tomato plants and then, an area, well, of course zucchini kind of need their own little area because they do expand a lot, but I always had, the same vegetables in the same row, and I had to get out of that when I had all of the trouble with bugs and worms and everything else. I had to, now my garden looks a little more disorganized, but I almost plant in circles instead. So I'm alternating different plants because boy, those bugs have a blast when they see 10 tomato plants in a row. They think they have hit that jackpot because they can go from one plant to another. So I'm kind of trying to discourage that. So instead of just using insecticides or, pesticides or whatever, which I don't like to use because I'm going to be eating these vegetables, I try to find other ways of dealing with it. I expanded my garden this year a little bit, and I did use that cardboard, and it is a miracle. Those earthworms and everything were just growing. They eat that cardboard, and then your soil the next year is so wonderful. So that was another great new thing that I did this year. Try to make a list of the plants that you want for next year. So when the catalogs are coming out or when you're going to the local nurseries to find plants, you will have that list in hand and you can find them. You can find out whether you want to try some heirloom plants or trying even to plants. I'm a big proponent of planting veggies from seeds. It is such a game changer. Oh my goodness, tomatoes, I have not ever bought a tomato plant. I've always planted from seeds, and I have such a blast in the winter planting these little seeds and watching them develop and then bringing them outside, and the flavor of those tomato plants is just unbelievable.
Yes,
So
it
think
is.
about that too. And even if you're going to buy them from your local nursery, the garden catalogs have a lot of information on the different varieties that you can, find, and they have a whole lot more information than you would find in a nursery. So I would suggest even looking there. And if you are going to plant your seeds, really, I always mark it down on my calendar on when I need to plant each, because peppers you plant at a different time than you do tomatoes. So, mark it down on your calendar when you're going to order, when you're going to plant, and then transplant the plants also.
Correct. I just got a pre-order for a seed catalog yesterday.
I know.
I know, it gets me so excited.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it just doesn't stop. And also rotating your crops. That's very, very important. You don't want to plant your tomatoes in the same place where you have planted peppers or tomatoes or eggplant or potatoes this year. You don't want to plant them in the same place next year. You really need to rotate because there still could be bugs in the soil or whatever that are left over from those plants. So you're just encouraging more problems for the following year.
Yeah, I had that problem with Colorado potato beetles. Oh my goodness, they enjoyed eating my eggplant for the first 2 years. And then I was a slow learner. Then finally it dawned on me that I need to put them somewhere else, and it solved the problem. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And another thing that's nice about the seeds and starting from seed is I'm a big fan, or my husband would say I'm cheap, but I'm a big fan of, again, reduce, reuse, recycle. Oftentimes you get a far bigger variety if you start from seed. Like last year we had Black Beauty tomatoes. I didn't even know they existed, and they were beautiful. They were an heirloom variety.
So tasty.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes, so tasty, so meaty and hearty. I was just eating, well, I mean, it is a vegetable, it is a fruit, but the point being, you know, you might look at seed packets and say, oh, Jiminy Crickets, I don't need 25 seeds or 50 seeds. But for a small investment, you could do a seed swap and trade seeds. You know, I'll trade seeds with Verna or with Debbie, and then you can expand what you're planting, and you're not spending any more than your original investment. So economically, oftentimes it's a good option.
Yes, and I have a very, very bad policy that I have got to improve on next year. I can't, you know, they say you plant a little bit more than you think you need, and then you find the hardiest little seedlings, and then you throw the rest away. Well, I was a special education teacher, and let me tell you, there's no child left behind. So I always plant every single one, and every year I keep saying, I can't do this again. I can't do this again because it's so hard to take care of all of those plants. So I plant every single one. Well, one thing I have learned is in order to protect some of my really good plants from the wild, you know, wildlife that we have around, on the outside, I will plant the seedlings that aren't as strong. And they always do grow, and you know they develop tomato plants. So anyway, so the wildlife seems to munch on the ones around the outside, and then they don't come inside the garden. So that is one of my little tricks of learning to live with the animals around me.
That's it. Yes. Yeah.
So some of these things we have already talked about, and this is just a suggestion. I have do not plant. That sounds a little offensive. I'm sorry, but you might think about, you know, not planting in a straight row. Just try, you know, because of that insect infestation. It has helped me. I haven't had any worms or bugs or anything since I've been and my plants are pretty wild. I mean, I would not give you a garden tour of my garden because it's like free range, but they are so healthy. And I haven't had any disease or insect infestation since I've been not planting in rows, instead going in circles or in free range designs. And I also always have like basil and marigolds and all kinds of flowering plants along with, and mint right alongside my plants. And there are all kinds of lists available online on what companion plants to plant together to really resist bad, you know, the insects or diseases, and to encourage really healthy harvests. Well, I must tell you also that whenever I'm looking for, searching for information, I always, I use a search engine, and then I have the topic, and then I follow it by .edu. And that means you're going to get like a cooperative extension, or you could do .cooperative extension. And that way you'll get research-based materials and materials that are really scientifically based. And that way it'll really help you to find out what people have really researched and best practices. And also that mulch. And it's so easy just to break up. I actually mow my leaves, and then I just run over them with a lawnmower, and then I put them in a wheelbarrow or whatever, and then bring them to my garden. And when I'm using to extend my garden, when I'm using cardboard, I will place cardboard down, and then I'll put like the leaf mulch right on top of it. Just layers and layers of it, or you might have to put a brick at each corner. Just make sure you don't have any tape or anything on the cardboard. And that has saved me from trying to till. My poor husband used to have to till every year. And you know what the tilling does, I found, is it encourages weed growth because it spreads all those weed seeds. I haven't had as much trouble now that I've been using the cardboard instead in the mulch. So I would really, and it really increases that water retention and moisture retention. So, and make sure you don't overwater, you know, during the year. So, but anyway, just think about all the issues you had this year and spend your winter just doing some research to find best practices to really improve your garden for the next year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here are some resources that we had used to create this presentation here in Delaware. As Verna had said, we recommend looking at cooperative extension sites. We're aware that there are a lot of apps out there. There's a lot of websites out there. Some of them are great. Some of them cost money. Your regional cooperative extension, if you're here in the States, has information that not only is timely, but it's appropriate to your region. So please, again, keep in mind that we are speaking about the Mid-Atlantic here and Delaware. And you see the link here for our lawn and garden website, but also for our Master Gardener helpline, where you can actually call and speak to a Master Gardener regarding questions you might have.
And that Gaia's garden, I'm just showing it right here. If you can
Oh, there you go.
thing. And this is about just research-based practices that kind of replicate nature. And I just love it because it's a wonderful, beautiful journal and resource on gardening, kind of replicating nature. So a lot of the material from here is from that book.
Exactly. So that is the end of our presentation. We do have about 10 minutes for any questions you all might have.
And I do have a few for you guys. The first one we got, someone said they have a bee's nest, in-ground bee's nest in their garden. They want to be able to garden there, but they don't want to kill or disturb the bees. Is there anything they can do?
I don't know what you would say, Verna, but I would recommend contacting a local beekeeper. And there are beekeeper associations, and they will come and humanely take care of the bees and remove them without damaging them, is my experience.
And a couple of months ago, I went on the University of Pennsylvania. They're always sending me, I got on their list, a cooperative extension there. They have wonderful, wonderful workshops. And there was a whole series on bees. And there was an entire workshop on the bees that dig in the ground. So you can also, if you would go on the University of Pennsylvania website, you might find, they had a recording of that workshop on bees. It was very, very helpful. And they have resources on their website also for that.
Sure. And I don't know anything about cost. Obviously, I know if you hire a pest control company, they would charge you and they would probably kill the bees. And of course, there's no way of knowing what kind of bees they are. I don't know that much about bees, but the same would apply if you find bees, say, swarming in the spring. Calling a local beekeeper, they would come and remove it for you. Then you could go get the honey.
If they're honeybees.
Yes, true.
I have a lot of native bees in my garden, which are solitary bees, and they don't produce honey. So the next question, Marie asked, she said she planted some bare root daylilies last fall. They grew, but they didn't bloom. So she says they still have the green leaves and they're not browning. So should she cut them back this fall?
I don't usually cut back my daylilies. And, you know, it takes a couple of years, I have found. Plants that you, especially native plants, if they're native plants, the first year, they're really working on their roots. You know, they're just really, I mean, native plants have very, very deep roots. So the first couple of years, that's where all their plant energy, I swear, is going into. It's going
Yeah.
into developing that root system. So I would be patient, and you know, maybe there is someone who is more of a daylily expert, but I've had them. Yes, you do need to cut the brown leaves. If you have brown leaves on your daylilies, you would cut them off. But you know, just let them be and be patient for a couple of years, because I have just learned that. I mean, I have a blueberry bush that is now 4 years old, and finally it looks like it's alive. You know, there are some things that just take a little more time, and especially native plants. I have to be more patient with them. When they finally mature, they're heaven. They're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. It's unbelievable. But I don't hear a lot of people saying it takes a couple of years for them to look like, you know, like, I'm like, what is this? You know, so just be patient, you know, other than the brown leaves, remove the brown leaves, but, you know, just let it be, and just, you know, talk to it, and it'll be fine in a couple of years.
There you go. Yeah, and it might be worth considering doing a soil testing in that area, because it's my understanding that daylilies need a lot of nitrogen. So maybe that's an issue as well. But I would agree. My experience is that it takes a couple of years, and I mean 2 or 3 years before you really see a significant growth.
Soil test is a good idea too.
Okay, our next question was about shredding leaves. I know you did mention, Verna, that you ran over them with the lawnmower. Do you have any other ideas?
There are like shredders, you know, that there are machines that they look like lawnmowers, and they actually shred. They mulch, or they mulch wood and wood chips, and they create wood chips and leaf mulch. So you can also use a shredder also. Do you have any suggestions, Karen? I know I just mow them.
Yeah, I don't, you know, I'm cheap. I told you I'm cheap. You know, get your grandchildren to run around and squish them.
You can buy leaf mulch, but I mean, but it's a shame if you have to pack up your bags of leaves and then you go buy leaf mulch, you know? I mean, that's how I feel. I'm cheap. I'm sorry, I'm just cheap.
Yeah, I would agree.
The next question, somebody asked if they can bring basil indoors from the garden if it was planted with the tomatoes. Can they remove it from a container and replant indoors?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, it's going to look droopy for a while, but it'll come back. And it's kind of sad sometimes to see what it looks like when you first bring it in. They go into shock, you know. But then you have to be patient.
Yes, just make sure you have the right location. You know, Verna spoke to sunlight earlier. Depending upon what herb you're growing, just be mindful of not only pot size, if you're transplanting, but watering and sunlight. Be mindful of. But absolutely, I've had it grow all winter. I mean, Jiminy Crickets. If anybody needs any basil, call me.
I'm growing it indoors right now, so.
There you go.
And I think one other suggestion, I don't know if anybody else has, I try not to like repot it right away. I just want to bring it in and have it get used to the new location. And then I might repot it after a month or so, just to, I treat it like a small child, you know, I just want to do it very gradually, you know.
My basil in my garden is all pretty much gone to seed. So you know that you can always also collect and save those seeds.
Absolutely.
It actually grows really well from seeds indoors. So like I said, I planted some seeds and I have them growing like crazy in my kitchen right now.
That's a great idea. Great idea.
The next question from Claire, she said she always brings her geraniums in for the winter, but she has tobacco worms this year. So is that going to be a problem to bring them indoors when they've had tobacco worms?
I would say cut it down and, you know, just watch it. I remember that timeout area, you know, and I would try, you know, just bring it, cut it back and remove all of the damaged leave.
I've never had them before. I've been bringing those geraniums in like you, Verna, for years.
Oh, that's a shame.
And
But
I looked and I saw something making holes in it, and I looked up what it could be, and they're supposedly tobacco worms, and I've never seen that before. So
try it before you give up on them. Just try to cut it back and take off the damaged leaves and
well,
put them in
I
timeout.
took off every worm by hand.
Oh, geez, good for you. And
Uh,
sometimes I've used like detergent and water. I know not every cooperative extension agrees with me, but I've done that, spray them with that.
have you had them before?
No, I haven't had that, but I've had just about every other bug that known to man, but no, I haven't had that.
Yeah, and I can't seem to grow basil inside. I don't know what it is. Now I don't have a southern window. I have a western window, but I don't know what it is. Every time I bring a basil plant in the house, it promptly dies. What am I doing wrong?
It could be the window. Try it in a different window.
I don't have a southern window though. I only
If you
have.
have an eastern window.
Or a grow light.
A grow light, there you go. Forgot about that. Yeah.
Mine
And
are
it
the
might be
grow
the
lights right
moisture
now.
too, maybe you're watering it too much or too little. It's all an experiment. It's like a science project,
It really is. That's true.
And
What
dill.
works one year doesn't work another year. So
Has anybody been successful in growing dill inside?
dill is not really one that's recommended to grow indoors, but you can always try it because I've grown some things indoors that they say can't grow indoors, and they're growing fine for me. So it's just, you never know. And some, you have to read the directions on the seeds. Some of them need to be cold to grow. They need to be at 55 degrees. Some of them need light to grow. Some of them need dark to grow. So it just depends on what it is. So I haven't tried to grow dill indoors though.
I haven't either.
Not doing. So the next question, guys, do you have a favorite seed catalog?
We're not supposed to recommend.
I know.
But I can I say it starts with a G? You didn't hear that, but anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find that, again, I get a lot. It keeps the Postal Service in business. And I find that certain catalogs, I don't get everything from one. I'll get something from this one and something from that one. And
there's some that have like heirloom plants. So just look at them. I mean, there's some really good ones for heirloom, but I use a different catalog for my hybrids. So, just read the catalog and read the seed description. Oh, you know what I look at? I look at what everyone says. What do they call those? Customer reviews. And I see what people have said about the seeds and the different plants, because I want to know that they've been tested by real gardeners too, along with the seed developers. So I'm always reading the reviews.
Right. And again, from a reputable site, because there are a lot of sites out there. I mean, you can even find seeds, on some internet sites, say for example, and I've never done it, but I've heard people have bought seeds from Amazon or eBay or other third-party places like that. I have never done that. I don't know if people have had success, but I like to make sure that it comes from a reputable site that's been around for a couple of years. Because there's always the risk that you're going to, I'm always afraid if I get a seed from a secondary source like that I'm not familiar with and is not necessarily known to me and my friends as being reputable, that it's going to breed either not what I paid for, or there's going to be some kind of an associated issue or disease or something. And I don't want to bring that into my garden.
Verna, what was that seed catalog you mentioned?
You're trying to get me fired from my volunteer job. Well, the heirloom seeds, I just, I use a couple of different.
Adams, did you say?
No, I just use a variety of catalogs. But I said my favorite for hybrid starts with a G.
Okay, the next question. Vernon, when you talk about using cardboard in the garden, Paula wants to know, how do you secure the cardboard down?
I usually put like leaf mulch on top, or soil, somewhere soil. I also put bricks on the corners. I use like large cardboard boxes, and use that. So you could use a brick or something like that. But I also put the leaf mulch because it's almost like lasagna gardening. You're putting layers on top of it. So by the spring, it's wonderful. You dig down. I used to get so excited. I'd invite my whole family over for digging down because the cardboard has, been disintegrated, and there's all these worms waiting for you. So we have a party in the spring.
Okay, the next question was, how can I rid my garden of stink bugs? From Linda.
I don't know. Debbie, you're the more of a bug expert than me.
You could see Karen, I was just dying to talk about this one, right? So stink bugs, there's different things you can do. I'm a big fan of hand picking them. So they don't bother me. I kind of like to just take them and squish them between my fingers. You can also combat them with predatory bugs. So if you plant a lot of flowers and different herbs, flowering herbs in your garden, you'll attract those predatory wasps and those predatory other insects like assassin bugs are great. They will actually consume those stink bugs for you. So that's one strategy. Don't put any pesticides on your garden because you'll kill the good bugs along with the bad bugs. The only pesticide I could even remotely suggest for this is take neem oil spray, the pure neem oil spray, and put it on directly on the plant that they're eating. And what'll happen is they'll ingest that plant and it'll kill them. Just make sure you don't spray the neem oil when there's bees are active, because if you actually get it on any of the insects, it'll hurt them. But the neem oil plan is that it's only harmful to the bugs that are eating the plant. So it won't hurt any bugs that aren't eating the plant. So that's what that would be my strategy. But basically when I see them, I hand pick them. And you also should know that there are certain types of stink bugs that are predatory stink bugs. They'll actually eat other bugs instead of eating your plants. So there's, if you can Google it, there's a way to identify whether it's a good stink bug or a bad stink bug. If you actually see them eating your plant, though, you can pretty much assume they're a bad stink bug. So if you keep them, I go in my garden every single day and I hand pick. That's just what I do. If your garden is small, that's manageable to do that. So see the next question, see what we have here. Megan said she wouldn't cut the daylilies unless they start to turn brown, which is pretty much the same thing that you said. So she also recommends soil testing and just letting them, giving them time like you suggested. See if there's anything here. Paula says my Monarda grew to around 5 feet this year. This is their second year. There's a lot of space around them, but they still got dusty mold. How do you prevent that?
Well, I mean, in my personal opinion, no more than the powdery mildew I see somebody has also inquired about. I think this year was kind of challenging weather-wise. There were conditions that favor those kinds of conditions, high humidity at night, the temperatures were kind of wonky. Then we had an awful lot of rainfall. Oftentimes the spores from those fungal diseases will also be carried on air currents. So, if you're living in an area, I found this happen to me one year where, the lady down the street had all kinds of things. They ended up down my way too because of that very thing. Obviously, if your plants are going to be in a greenhouse, you have some protection from those kind of things. But I personally haven't had a whole heck of a lot of success. What do you think, Vern? Have you had any powdery mildew issues or anything along those
I
lines?
just wonder if you cut back the leaves,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
so that when they grow back next year, it might help, but you just have to really try to make sure they're getting the same amount of moisture. So maybe mulch would help, because it retains some moisture, but it also keeps it from getting too much moisture in the soil. So maybe something like that would help. And just a stronger layer of, a larger layer of mulch might help, or it's this, you're trying to just, they don't like a lot of moisture, and then going from a lot of moisture to, dry conditions. That's what usually makes it worse.
And
Just removing all that debris, in the fall from the plants, just cutting back all the leaves that have been damaged should help a little.
Sure.
Or even if it doesn't, in a couple of years, I might just, I'm getting new plants because I'd be afraid that it would be spreading to other plants. I mean, if it's a native plant.
And then the next question is, do you have any suggestions for vegetables to plant in containers besides tomatoes?
Oh, you can plant lots of
Oh.
things. Cucumbers, peppers,
Sure.
eggplant.
I did eggplant this year. Yep.
And some of the seed catalogs and some of even the nurseries now have varieties that are developed for pots, and so if you go on the seed catalog, any seed catalog, it'll tell you which varieties are good for, like indeterminate plants, or, and they have patio tomatoes and semi-determinate tomatoes, which are kind of developed for, or indeterminate rather, they are developed for pots. And
Oh, you can do a boatload in pots. And companion planting is often very helpful when you're growing your vegetables. You can do the tomato and the basil in a pot. It doesn't have to be in a garden. You can do so much, so much. The only limit is your imagination. Give it a try. And if it doesn't work this year, reassess and try it a different way next year.
exactly.
Megan says she
Hey,
grew
Debbie.
squash, peppers, and tomatoes in containers this year. So they did great, and herbs.
Yeah.
I think we have like one last
Hey, Deb.
question. Yes.
Real quick, a couple of people have asked if you could paste the evaluation link in the chat, as they can't copy and cut from the screen. If
Right.
you wouldn't mind.
Yes. I'm trying, I know they can't do that. I just didn't have a chance to get to where I was going to do that yet. I can actually copy this and paste it into the chat.
And thank you all for all of your great questions and for joining us.
Yes, thank you. This was fun. We
Great
appreciate.
job. Thank you for doing it.
Debbie, there was part of
I'm
my
having trouble.
question. There was one of my questions you didn't ask.
Oh, what was that?
I was about to.
You were?
Yes.
Okay.
What would you like to know?
No, it was actually a statement. We were
Oh.
talking about composting, and on Mike McGrath's show about a month ago, he said that if you're using pre-emergence on your lawn, that you should not put that grass in your compost, because studies have shown that even with the breakdown of the compost, that they have found that just micro amounts of the broadleaf weed killer stays in it, and then it's possible that you will have seeds that won't germinate the following year in the compost. If you find that you're not having seeds germinate in the compost, it could be because you've used the pre-emergence in the grass that you put in it.
That's a
Yes.
great point. Thank you for sharing that. That's very important. I love that, Joe.
And Claire, the question I thought you were talking about was the one you asked about powdery mildew.
Well,
Oh.
oh,
'Cause she said powdery mildew wiped out her cukes and is working on her tomatoes. What should she use on it?
I think Megan had posted bee balm.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea.
oh,
And
No,
make
I
sure,
just said that Bernarda or bee balm is prone to powdery mildew.
oh,
Oh, I'm
okay.
You know,
sorry.
but
Gotcha.
at the rate of right now, I would say that your tomatoes are probably about done
Yeah.
for the year,
Mhm.
especially if they've got powdery mildew. So I'd probably call it a season, you know.
I'm
And
using,
remember, crop rotation for next year.
well, I have a very small garden, unfortunately, fenced in because we have so many deer. So it's about 10 by 10. So I had been rotating with the peppers, and then I found out that's not what you want to rotate them with. So,
Yeah.
Right. They're the same
Yes,
family.
because they're all nightshades. Yeah.
so that's the unfortunate part. But um, I read up a lot on the internet, and I bought a fungicide that I put systemically in the ground. And then I've been spraying them with a potassium bicarbonate, and which is supposed to kill them on contact, but it doesn't seem to be working. At least not yet. I have some hope of saving the tomatoes. The cuke leaves are all gone, so I'm not going to get any more cukes than I already have. I've taken off every leaf. I'm being very careful. I have one pair of cutters that I use just for the fungus, and I'm putting them all in a separate garbage bag,
Good.
separate plastic bag that I keep sealed. And I am not putting that in with yard waste, and I am not putting it in my compost. It is going in the garbage, even though it's not supposed to go in the garbage, but it is not going.
Some things go in the garbage.
What? No,
I've actually planted, I used trellises this year for my cucumbers, and that seemed to help a little bit.
Yeah.
yeah, I use
Off
trellises.
the ground, yeah.
I used trellises, but I didn't realize what powdery mildew was until it was too late.
Yeah, it's really common. Really, really.
Lesson learned the hard way.
Okay. Well, I don't see any new questions for now. So I would like to remind everybody that if you do have additional questions, you can always email us at kentcountymastergardeners@gmail.com or call the helpline at 302-730-4000. And we'll be happy to help you. You can see future workshops that you can register for on the website at Delaware State University that's shown here. And you can also go back and watch this presentation over again once it gets posted, or any of our other past presentations that have been recorded and posted there. I do appreciate you completing the workshop evaluation. If you didn't get it, it's in the chat. I did paste it in the chat. I know you can't click on this one on here. I hate that about Zoom. I wish you could. Everybody who's watching could just click away, but it doesn't work. The other thing is that I will be sending a follow-up email with the same exact information in it. I don't believe there are any more handouts, guys, right? You got the only handout ahead of time, and it does have those resources on it that you can visit on their credits resources page. So I appreciate you coming and appreciate you completing the evaluation and continuing to support us in our workshops. We are volunteer educators, and we do just live off of helping other people with their gardening issues. That's what we do. So with that, let me see if there's anything else new here.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
So, yep, we're going to.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you at the herb
Yes.
presentation.
Take care.
Thank you all so much for your attention.
Happy gardening.
Thank you.
Gardening.
Bye.